Welcome to your Healthy Home Show. How are you,
Hey,
Steve?
how's it going, Joe?
We're doing good. I'm doing good.
A little chilly Friday.
It is cold, Steve, and we're talking about gardening. And I read something that as soon as it starts getting warm, you want to start planting assortment of vegetables and so forth and so on that are more
They like the cool.
they're like yes. So, but here we are in the end of May, and 48 degrees.
Yeah, my lettuce is loving it.
Yeah. So today's topic, Steve, I'm excited because I'm going through the process of
Mhm.
starting my first home garden,
Nice.
and so today's topic is organic home gardening. Easy.
Yeah, easy. That's the key word. Um, because you can get overwhelmed. Like anything, whenever you want to start getting into something, um, it's best to test the waters, try it a little at a time. If you fail, it's not a big thing. Some people I see them, they'll start out with, a 10 by 20 garden and say, oh, and think that that's small. And you could do an awful lot in 10 by 20 feet.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I pulled up something here and it said a half a ton of tasty, beautiful, organically grown vegetables from a 15 by 20 foot can produce over 100 pounds of tomatoes.
Right.
So, $2 worth of seeds can produce a large amount of food. So we
The,
can't underestimate
the word there that I want to emphasize is can. It doesn't mean it will,
it. Yeah.
because there's a lot of things that go on in the garden that just, especially a new gardener, that gets them discouraged. There's an awful lot of pests, but yet I read an interesting thing today that only 2% of the insects are harmful to your garden. Most of the insects that we want to keep them there because they're actually keeping the bad insects away. So,
Yes, and I read that too, and it's amazing how they all have a part in this organic or this cycle.
yep.
So it's
Before you step on that spider or you kill that wasp, understand that those two types of insects are going to devour pests that would hurt your garden. And yet those insects won't hurt your garden.
right.
So ladybugs, another one,
Interesting,
praying mantis.
interesting.
So
So
anyhow,
I want to ask you a question, Steve. Why have a home garden?
there's a lot of reasons. The first one that I want to say is there's something magical about watching something grow from a seed to a full-blown plant that's producing something that you can enjoy. Just that alone, if you have kids, it's a good way. If you get kids gardening at a young age, I've talked to a lot of elderly people who are in their 70s and 80s who are still gardening, and they attribute it to their parents
Right,
at a young age. Once you get hooked, you don't ever want to quit.
right,
So,
right.
and the other benefit is one, you're voting with your dollar again. Anything that you can produce that you're not allowing these large food producers to saturate the market with GMO food, in your own little world, you're voting. You're
Right,
saying no. These tomatoes I got are organic,
right, right,
and
right.
they have no GMO. The seeds I get from my plant next year, I'll be able to plant again and have tomatoes again.
I attest and I can relate and I appreciate the having the children, the family, and to be outside and to be a part of that. My personal reason, and we've talked about this in the past, is survival, Steve.
Hmm.
And it's not just survival for those stormy weather or you have your food, you have your own. But the fact is I believe we've become too dependent, or maybe we've taken for granted how easily it is to get food. And we know if that should go away for whatever reason, to be able to have the education and the ability to harvest and grow our own food.
You're right, Joe. Years ago, think of the American farm. We had so many American farms where there was just enough cows to produce milk. There were just enough hens for
Hmm.
eggs. They raised their own pork. Um, then they raised all their vegetables, and anything that didn't go to feed the animals, So, you know, some fruit or vegetable go bad, it got fed to the animals, recycled.
Right.
If it didn't go to there, it went into a compost pile along with the animals' manure. And
Nothing
this
was
was
wasted.
all now back into the garden. It was a perfect cycle, sustainable gardening. Today, these large food producers, what is happening is anytime you grow or raise one species on a particular plot of land, it now becomes susceptible to pest.
Right.
It becomes susceptible to disease. So now they need antibiotics. Now they need drought-resistant seeds because of this or because of that.
Right.
The whole balance. The reason you need all to grow stuff the way they're growing is because they have lost the balance of the ecosystem of what our ancestors once
Right.
did.
Right. Right.
I even saw this group who they're even to this day they're not how do I want to say socially, they're kind of recluse. And it's a tribe, and what they did is they produced their gardens on floating, on a pond. They float certain, I don't know exactly how they do it, but they float their garden, and it keeps all the animals away from eating it, and yet it doesn't need water because it's pulling water from the pond.
Right. Right.
And so everybody has a way to be creative, to have sustainable, easy gardening. So like you said, maybe you just want to start out with a few plants.
I like what you just said. Everyone has a way. And I think what we really want to communicate today is that it's easy, and it's easy to get started.
Yep. And the first thing you got to remember is before you kill anything, there's usually a reason for it. Even a weed.
Yep.
I was reading today that a weed in a garden, certain types of weeds, even though they don't have any value for food in your garden, that they are what are called butterfly plants that butterflies go to, lay their eggs, so now the larvae eats those plants as they're grown, and now you've got beautiful butterflies, and you can attract birds. Well, if you attract birds to your garden, they're eating the bugs that are causing the issues. So it's a full cycle. Just don't break that cycle. The moment we step on a spider in our garden, we're breaking a cycle. Right. We've got to do it within a full balance, and you can do it. And you know, when we think of the word organic, we normally think of today expensive, organic,
right?
Too much money.
I
can't afford it.
Have said that to me.
So I want to share just something real quick. If we can share my screen here, Joe. It's called Organic Gardening on a Dime, and I just came up with this. It's about 6 slides, and I just want to say, you know, that this quote, that a few items around the home, a little time, and a little love equals valuable organic vegetables you can enjoy. Nothing there talks about money.
Right.
It's time, a little love, and a few things around the home. By producing your own non-GMO, now for those who don't know what GMO is, genetically modified organism, which is a lot of the food today, people are getting concerned because it hasn't really been tested. We have countries around the world that won't even accept America's produce anymore because of the GMOs.
Amazing.
So some countries ban them.
That should tell you something.
So when you're producing your own non-GMO vegetables, you're really voting once again with your dollar and telling the large food producers that you want healthy, natural food. You know, Joe, I really believe that organically the world could feed itself if we went back to the American farm model. So here's an old battery box. Now, for those of you who don't know what this is a box that would hold a battery, 12-volt battery, sometimes like a power supply for a sump pump, backup sump pump, or a boat. And it has handles on the side. So I took one of these. Well, actually, I took several of them I had hanging around in the barn. I was going to throw them out. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? It's $10 to go buy a planter
Right.
pot
Right.
for me to plant a tomato in.
I love it.
And I said, $10? But I can buy a lot of tomatoes for $10. I'm kind of almost making it. If I had to go buy the planter, buy the soil, buy the stone, buy the plant, deal with the fertilizer, water it every day, and then if you forget to water, it dies, and so all your investment is gone. You know, it's cheaper for me just to go down the street to an organic farmer and buy tomatoes.
Right.
So I said to myself, if I'm going to do this, I have to do this cheap to make it worthwhile.
Right.
So I had to clean this with soap and water, got all the acid out, made sure that it was nice and clean, and then what I did is I drilled holes in the bottom, half-inch holes. So I just took a regular half-inch paddle bit and, you know, put about 11 holes there.
To allow the water to drain. And
that's so the plant roots don't rot, because if you don't do that, water stays in the bottom of this, and the roots would get in the water and just die. They'd end up rotting. So then whatever stones. Now you notice there's some big stones there. There's some little stones.
Right.
I don't care what kind of stones they are. All we want to do is block the holes so that the soil doesn't block those drain holes. So we put about 1 inch or 2 of stone down in the base, and it can be anything, any type of stone. Irregular shapes are actually better because they allow more aeration in the soil anyhow. The next step is you want to add your soil halfway and then place the plant right in the center. And then you want to fill the soil up to about 1 inch or 2 from the top of the container. Now they say to bring your soil up to the first set of leaves of your plant.
Okay.
Is when you're planting, that's kind of where they want you to put that. So this is done. What I like about this, Joe, is you see these boxes, they have handles on them.
Right.
And, you know, because it's not all that heavy. I picked one up this morning, and so this morning, as you can see, I was able to move this to where the sun was. So I can, if I have a garden and I'm going to have, you know, 10, 12 plants on my patio,
right.
I can move them wherever I want.
Relocate them, right?
Now,
what's nice about this is if you have the spot that you've picked, in 3 weeks into this, you find that it hasn't worked out. Now you have that ability to relocate, to adjust accordingly. That's great.
Now, if you looked at this, the box didn't cost me anything. It was a throw-out thing.
Right.
The stone didn't cost me anything. The soil I mixed compost in with my soil, so from last year, so that it has plenty of nutrients. The only thing we bought in this case was the plant. But even then, if you have a compost, those plants, a lot of times, from year to year, you'll see them coming up, and you know you could save the money by taking those plants and redoing.
Right.
So in essence, this is a sustainable way to garden because it costs you nothing. Now next year, I'm going to take all the soil out. I'm going to mix it in with new soil.
Right. And
recycle the stones, wash them out, and clean the boxes out, and then I'm ready to go again next year.
Excellent, Steve. So this is, and again, you decided to take an existing container that you had, but how many of us have older pots or may have these Rubbermaid containers or plastics that maybe look like they're cracked or you're ready to throw them out?
So Joe, another thing that you can do if you don't have a container around the house, be creative. Go to a bakery. These bakeries get 5-gallon buckets of all kinds of ingredients for making donuts and whatever, or restaurants that have pickles that come in barrels, 5-gallon buckets. Get food-grade containers. Be careful about using containers that have been storing chemicals, because that may go off into your food.
Right.
So get food-grade containers. Many times these restaurants will give you as many buckets as you need. Drill holes in the bottom of it, and there you go.
Excellent. The other thing that comes to mind, Steve, is that these containers, you could have them so that they're conveniently located near your kitchen. So as you're preparing food or cooking, you could get your ingredients or your produce freshly just by harvesting, whether it's spinach, lettuce, as you said earlier. So it makes it easier to harvest because it's close by, but it also makes it easier for you to maintain in terms of
Right.
watering.
I learned this year by having our garden. We built a small greenhouse, and I put it right on the deck. And so now you walk out the back door, you're right there. It's so easy that any moment that you've got a few minutes, you can enjoy your garden, where before it seemed like we had to walk too far, that we didn't make as many trips as we should have.
Yeah. As a child, my mom had a garden, and it was oversized because she spent a lot of time in there. And I remember, as you said, every time I needed to do something in the garden, I had to put on my boots. I had to put on special clothes. I had to make sure I was not going to get eaten by bugs, and it was a project. And and that's not wrong either. But again, we're looking at starting off and making it easy. So Steve, and as a first step, I love the fact that if I'm a homeowner or if I'm living in an apartment or a condo, you've given me a great way to get started by having pots. Now, then the other option is to do what they call a raised garden.
Right.
And I think the number one, and I'm going through this now, and I hope to maybe follow up with another video that showcases what I'm able to accomplish. But picking the right location. You might have a front yard, backyard, side yard. What's the number one, or what are the things that we should be looking for when we're trying to find a spot?
Good point. Some of the things that you got to consider is how much sun a day you're going to get. Most plants require at least 6 hours a day of sun.
Right.
Some like more, some like a little less, but generally you want to shoot for at least six hours. And in my house, that's tough because we have a lot of trees.
Right.
The other thing, Joe, is if you're going to plant directly in the ground in raised beds, a good handy tool to get yourself is a soil tester. It's a little device that you stick in the soil. It'll tell you the pH of the soil, so you know what to add if you need to add stuff to make it more alkaline or more acidy.
Okay.
It'll tell you the the moisture content in that soil, and they're pretty inexpensive. You can look up online a soil tester. And that's a handy tool to have along with your other tools. The other thing that I think is a good thing to do is try to come up with a way to organize all your garden tools. I've seen some of these kits where they have a 5-gallon bucket and it has an apron around it, and you've got all your different garden tools.
Right.
And then you can sit on the bucket. When you get tired, you flip the bucket over and you can sit on it.
Everything has a purpose.
But that way, when you go to the garden, you got everything with you.
So I like the pot, and I'm from what I understand, a raised garden, it's more productive, meaning that you don't have to leave aisles for paths for you to walk through. So in other words, you can grow more in a smaller space.
Absolutely.
Which makes it easier to maintain.
We should show that picture. I like that picture you have.
This is just a snapshot that we were able to capture. And
great.
Again, you're looking at, I believe this looks like to be 6x2.
That makes things so easy and I want to even say one thing further, Joe. If you had the room to make a little bit more space between them to where you could sit down, sometimes you just want to sit down and work. Weeding or whatever, or checking things out, but having that aisle like that, I mean, look how easy it is to maintain. And this is pretty simple to do, and raised beds like this too, it allows you to plant earlier in the spring because the soil ends up getting warmer quicker. So
it's another point. So Steve, this is looking at these images, and for me, this is a great family project to be able to get into and start. And one thing I learned in just talking with you, a garden doesn't have to exist in one spot in your yard. You could have a raised bed in your backyard. You could have a raised bed or a small planter in your front yard. And depending on the vegetable and how much sun or shade or temperatures. I mean, it all plays a role. So you could mismatch and have a variety of things growing in different areas.
So the kids too, at any age, I want to tell a story. I went to the Milton E. Earl School here in Westport when I was in the elementary school, and I'll never forget. We had a wonderful principal. Her name was Miss Tripp, Audrey Tripp, and she loved gardening, but she did something for us kids that I'll never forget. And we're talking, this is over 50 years ago, Joe.
Wow.
And I still, to this day, don't ever forget it. It's why I love gardening. They took a little 8x10 patch. Now, this is elementary school. In the back, we had a baseball field where we played baseball, and we donated a little section of it for a garden. And I remember the maintenance man at the time, Mr. Brightman, I think is his name, and he taught us kids. He got us to pick out the corn seeds, and what we did is we built these hills, and he showed us how the Native Americans would build the corn, put the corn in the middle, grow the peas around, so the corn, as the corn was growing, the peas would have something to grow up, and then we would grow squash around it to keep the animals away from the other things.
Wow.
And we used fish, a piece of fish as fertilizer, and every day, I'll tell you what, as elementary kids, I remember when we hit recess, you couldn't almost get into the garden, around the garden, because all the kids wanted to see what was growing and how it was growing.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
So you're telling me you're going to do this garden with your family, and it allows them to take ownership that plant's mine. I did that. And 50 years from now, Joe, they're going to think back and they're going to say, I remember my dad, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So we all need to do that to young people, help them to see the need to grow our own and to avoid large food production that's processed.
Yeah, and I often use this word, Steve. You've used it quite often, to be more self-reliant and not as dependent as we are now. So I think that's a powerful statement.
When a fertilizer, these commercial fertilizers, they do not have organic material, and they're inorganic.
So that leads me to my second question. We've picked the right spot. There's 6 hours roughly a day of sun. Let's talk about soils. And we're talking about organic soil. So obviously we can't just go out and buy soils from a typical store.
Right.
When we're looking at our soils, how do we decide what soils do we introduce, fertilizers, things of that nature?
Well, one thing you got to be careful of, if you're fertilizing your lawn, try to use, they have organic fertilizers for lawns now, because if you are throwing these inorganic fertilizer, chemical fertilizers on your lawn, and that can seep into your soils or your garden, that's not good. So that's one thing. The other thing is, if you want good soil, you make it.
Right. So the word compost comes to mind.
You make your own soil. And if you can't make it enough, you don't have enough kitchen waste. Now, I have an idea on my compost bin now. I'm going to do something a little different. Because I throw my kitchen waste in a pan on the counter with a cover. Then from there, it's going to go to a 5-gallon bucket with a cover on my back deck. Then when that's full, I'm going to throw it into my compost bin. Well, my compost bin I'm making out of wood pallets that are reusable.
Right.
They're going to get thrown away. So I made like a little E, and I throw the kitchen waste in, and then the grass clippings. But what suggestion I saw online was interesting, is have a barrel of your leaves or your straw,
right,
or your organic material, that when you throw your kitchen waste down, throw the leaves over it, so it covers it, keeps the flies away, keeps the critters away.
Right.
And you're also, building up the soil. You need the leaves. So if you don't have enough leaves, you know what? At certain times of year, you can go on the curb. People have them in bags they want to get rid of.
Right. And that's all stuff.
That's your soil.
Yep. Improve the nutrients of
go
the soil.
go to why not go to a grocery store and say, look, I've got an organic garden I'm trying to do. Can I get some of your produce that goes bad? Would you mind me having a few buckets of it, and I'll come pick it up over the next week or two?
That'd be a great relationship to
People
have.
are willing to help you.
Right.
Stores got to get rid of this stuff.
Right.
And rather than throwing it out, it's better to give it to you to make soil.
Right.
Make your own soil.
Excellent. Excellent.
Right.
And you're helping the overall, I call it environment, because now you're utilizing something that could be
I like
recycled.
that picture you have over there too. That's awesome. Joe, when you go to do soil for yourself, do you have next to you a horse farm or
I do.
a cow farm, something that?
I have a horse. Yeah.
Yeah, you might be able to build your soil up by, cow manure is, I mean, that's what the American farm thrived on, right?
Right.
This is beautiful.
Yeah,
wow.
this is something that's already, and when you talked about having a diverse, and you said plant something accordingly. Look, I mean this is quite an arrangement.
Wow.
And what I like about this picture, Steve, is the density.
Now you didn't do that, did you?
I didn't do that. No, that I hope to accomplish at least 10% of that. But
that's
but
awesome.
it doesn't look complicated. I mean, if you look at it, this is really basic. People who are watching and listening, but look how dense, and look at the variety of food. And Steve, like you, I've made a decision to try to buy organic, to try to buy local as much as I can to support our local economy, our local community, and for me, when I'm looking at images such as this, it makes me think, well, I'm not only saving money, because obviously this is more inexpensive, but I'm eating healthier. But going to the store, I try to buy organic. Buying organic at the store is a lot different than growing it.
No.
Your own.
The other thing too, that I'm looking at this, I mean, what a variety of food in such a small area. And that is probably, if you're a beginner, that's probably too much.
Right.
But look at how much you can grow in you could grow that almost in any place. Yeah. And yet
exactly. And think about this. Harvesting is probably just as fun as planting and watching it grow, because as you go in and you're taking leaves off of your lettuce or your spinach, and you're not taking too much, but you're taking enough to sustain a meal for maybe a family of 4. And next week or the day after, you can come and harvest somewhere else where, this will last months depending on the climate that you're in.
It brings up one more important ingredient, the seeds.
Right.
You want to make sure that your seeds are heirloom seeds. What that means is that when these seeds are planted and you grow a tomato plant, if you you take the seeds from those tomatoes and you save them, you'll be able to grow another tomato plant.
Right.
These GMO, genetically modified plants that are out there right now, the majority of them, there's very few cucumber plants, true cucumber heirloom plants left.
Right.
Because they're also genetically modified. A lot of them, if you grow a cucumber and take the seed, you can't grow another cucumber. So you got to make sure the seeds you're buying are heirloom, and you could go online and buy certified heirloom seeds.
So Steve, let's talk about this. And you see all different types of marketing in regards to different types of seeds.
Right.
So is there something that we look for? I know there's one marketing or packaging that suggests that it's USDA.
Right.
Is it enough just the fact that the seed says
it has to be a certified organic is what you're looking for.
Okay, such as this one.
That
here,
means these seeds right here, when you plant this lettuce, and you were to allow one of your plants, which is what you should do, at the end of the season of its growing season, it's going to go to seed, and you save those seeds, you will never have to buy seeds again. See, the thing about organic gardening is that it's sustainable, and once you're into it, it's very little cost because you're saving and reusing everything. It's the initial investment and the knowledge.
Right.
But once you've got that, if you go to the Stop and Shop one day or another store and there happen to be no food in the aisles because of some disaster, at least you know how to grow, right?
Right. Exactly. That's a valid point. And I also have to say that there's a local small market, which is not too far from where we live, that sells organic food. And I saw a sign about a week or two. It said organic seeds and
Nice.
expect it at this date. So you may look at
Local.
local farms that that
It's better to buy your seeds and your plants locally. Sometimes you could go buy a tomato plant at one of these big box stores, but they're produced in California. Now you're expecting it to be adjusted to growing in New England,
right,
and it won't do as well. So it's better to buy your seeds and your plants, even your bushes and trees in your yard should be locally grown.
right, right,
So,
right. So the second part or the third part of this is, once you have your seeds planted, your soil, your beds raised, we talked about this lightly, or you mentioned it, controlling pests.
right.
And that becomes, and you see so much information out there, Steve. Use this seven spray, or use this chemical, or use this, or use that. But obviously, we can't use any of these products because,
Right.
just as you said before, if you're treating your grass with pesticides, you can't use those clippings in your soils. So you really need to buffer and protect. So what do we do to control, slugs and?
One thing I learned that I was reading earlier this week, Joe, it said that use the least invasive method. So usually the first method is if you see a bug, pick it and get it off your plant. Why?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
get it away.
yeah,
You
right,
don't need to spray it with a
right,
chemical.
right,
Just
right,
pick it off.
right,
You see a hookworm, you grab 'em with gloves, you pull them off.
right.
By the way, if you want, and you have a few chickens, sometimes let them into your garden. They'll eat all the bad bugs,
Interesting.
and they
Right,
love it too.
right, right.
So,
So there are natural ways.
right.
I saw here in the notes, Steve, it said something about planting garlic
Oh,
and
wow.
planting planting what is it, garlic, as well as hold on here, garlic, daffodils, and cyan spray. Does that make sense? Like cyan spray? But again, these are natural
Natural.
things that
Garlic and peppermint
peppermint.
are
Okay.
very, very good for
And
natural
and
pesticides.
they don't have to be in the garden; they can be around the garden.
Absolutely.
And that keeps, obviously insects away. I read something also about deer and rabbit, fencing. There's an image here that illustrates fencing here, and but this is, well, actually, no, this isn't fencing. This is more of, if you want to grow up,
Right.
you can
right.
have
Trellis.
these
It's a nice
plants grow.
looking, good examples. Well, Joe, we're out of time this week. I got a feeling we got to do a little bit more on this. I want to see pictures of yours.
Oh yeah, I can definitely.
Maybe we can have another show and show them some of your handiwork.
That sounds good. But again, at the end of all this, your start, Steve, was incredible because it allows people to do things even if it's on your windowsill, if it's
Yeah.
on your back porch
Start
or
small.
your deck. Start small, and food tastes better. It's
Mhm.
healthier, and you're saving money.
And you're teaching your kids.
Right, absolutely.
Okay.
Another edition of Your Healthy Home Show. We'll see you next week.